Good morning, Shortridge High School, and apologies for the delay. We had some technical issues on this rainy October, but we are joined by Commissioner Evan Hawkins and Shortridge students Alad and Idali. And Alad, I'll send it over for you for the first introduction, and then we'll go from there. So thanks everyone for being with us.
Hello everyone, I'm Alad, and I have the pleasure of introducing IPS School Board Commissioner Evan Hawkins. Evan Hawkins has been an on the IPS School Board since 2018, or 2019 technically, I suppose. He's a parent at School 70. Actually, funny enough, that's where I first met him. It's the same school as my brother. He currently is the Facilities Director at Marian University. He also previously was the Chief Operating Officer for Kindley, and he has his MBA from Purdue University. So thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for inviting me, and thanks for look forward to the discussion.
Good morning. My name's Idali, and I'm a senior at Shortridge. And the first question I have for you, Mr. Hawkins, is what is the IPS School Board and what does it do?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. Yeah, so the IPS School Board is, we serve as, there's 7 of us, and 5 of those 7 seats are assigned by a geographic boundary, and 2 additional seats are at-large seats. And we receive our delegated authority from the state of Indiana. So the state of Indiana has created school boards, and our role is to serve in a governance role and to oversee the district as it focuses on its one important mission, which is to improve academic outcomes and achievement for students in the city of Indianapolis.
Yeah, so sort of what is the role of the IPS School Board job, like in relation to the administration or sort of the way the district is run?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this is, from my humble opinion, school systems and school districts schools exist to educate and to improve outcomes and enhance outcomes for young people, so that they can go on and be the amazing people that they desire to be and hope to be in the future world. And what differentiates the school board from the actual administration is, as a school board member, and I've kind of learned this, I think when I came onto the board, or when I was running for the office, I think I had a different understanding of what a school board member was. And I think I have learned quite a bit since then, and it's been very humbling. But what I would say is, I think I assumed that our role was sort of a super manager of the administration and of the district. So, ultimately we all had veto power over decisions that were made, down to the type of food that's served in the lunch line, to the number of seats on a school bus, all those granular conversations. And so really what I have come to understand is that we really have a few important roles. One of those is that it's critical that we serve as a voice and a conduit between the community and the school system, and back and forth. And so it's our job to be able to amplify and to articulate and share with our communities what IPS is doing, but then also receive that feedback and lift up the voices of our community and share that with the district, make sure that voices are brought into the conversations. Secondly, one very important role is that we are responsible, the 7 of us, for evaluating the superintendent, and that's a very important role. The superintendent, Alicia Johnson, is now in her, I want to say, going into her 2nd year now, right? But definitely she serves as the chief executive officer, aka the superintendent of the school system, and ultimately she makes the decisions and recommendations that come forth to the board. And so it's our role as a board to make sure that she's living out the expectations of that the board and the community have for IPS. And then thirdly, which is very important as well, is we have what's called a fiduciary responsibility. So what that really means is we are, as a school system, recipients of many different sources of dollars and resources. So federal funds come to the state of Indiana, and the state of Indiana then delegates those to school districts. Secondly, the state of Indiana, through sales tax and income taxes, there are dollars that are allocated through the General Assembly, the government of the state of Indiana, and those are allocated to IPS. And then in addition to that, local funds, property taxes, which are dollars that pay for schools and pay for police and first responders, et cetera, the district receives those funds. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that those resources are being appropriated and allocated in a way that is A, fundamentally appropriate and legal, but secondly, that those resources are really doing what they're supposed to do, which is drive into the classroom and educate our kids and make sure that our students are receiving the highest and best opportunities they could possibly have. You know, we do a lot of contracts and sign contracts and negotiate and talk about different topics. Those are very important as well.
Yeah.
Don't want to degrade the fact that food service and transportation are critically important to ensuring that students receive the meals and are able to get to school. But a lot of that heavy lifting work is done at the administration level. And at the end of the day, the recommendation from the superintendent comes to the board, and we either accept it or we recommend that adjustments be made, or we reject it.
Yeah.
Our next question is, what does it mean to be on the school board?
Great question. You know, I would say that it is first and foremost just humbling. And yeah, I think if I didn't know as much as I know now, then I thought I maybe say differently. I thought I knew a whole lot more than I truly know, or than I really knew. And it's very humbling to be in this role and have the opportunity to serve the over 30,000 students that are part of the IPS family. And it also means that there's a heavy sense of responsibility to make sure that in my role that I'm being thoughtful. I think that's what constituents in the city of Indianapolis and our community expect of me, is to be thoughtful and considerate. And so, you know, there's a heavy responsibility with that. And again, it all wraps in sort of the honor of this opportunity to serve. And much of that is rooted in my heritage and rooted in my grandparents, my ancestors, and this sort of value of service to our community. And so I take great pride in the opportunity to represent you know, the parents and the students and the families of this school district in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I think, you know, you touched there on a little bit earlier on, you know, sort of the role of the school board, the different roles of the school board, you know, and approving the budget and choosing the superintendent and running contracts and things like that. But why, of all that, you know, why did you particularly want to be in the school board? What was it that made you sort of choose to run?
Well, thank you for that question. Yeah, so, you know, my family, I come from a family of educators and civically engaged individuals, as well as ministers. And one of the key, I would say, drivers of my family history and heritage and ancestors was, you know, we talked a lot about values. And, you know, when I think about some of the values that drive, you know, the work that, you know, why I show up and how I show up, I think about faith, I think about integrity, hard work, and justice. And whether it was every day after school, my parents worked, and so I went to my grandparents' house, and my grandmother was a teacher. My grandfather was a gentleman who came up from the South, moved into a community in Southern Indiana, and grew up on a farm. And so those values of hard work and education and honesty and certainly justice were critical. And so, you know, my grandparents were products of Jim Crow South, you know, and that was the world that they grew up in. And so our conversations, whether it be with those grandparents or when I would go over to my other grandparents and former teacher and a grandfather who was in law enforcement then, and he was a business owner and did a couple different things. You know, we talked about, you know, and I was a young person, so I don't know if I necessarily absorbed it all, but we would talk about, you know, their history and their experiences. We talk about policies. We talk about why communities of color live in communities that they live in, and that this wasn't sort of a serendipitous sort of conversation, but this was really about, you know, systems and institutions that drove people into communities. And so we talked about all these things that happened, and so I hear those echoes, and I've heard those echoes my entire life from my grandparents and other members of my family who, you know, who spoke of, about, and on behalf of those who have been marginalized and underserved for generations going back hundreds of years. And so, you know, so that's a little bit of kind of where I've come from, but going forward, you know, as a husband, as a parent, you know, you don't lose those values and lose those stories from your ancestors and your heritage and those conversations. Those come with you and move with you. And so, as I became more aware of the opportunity to serve in this role, I had already been working in the world of education. And prior to education, I worked in the world of criminal justice, and I saw the true injustices associated with that world. And so I think that sort of the compound effect of all these experiences, when the opportunity arrived to decide if this was something I was going to do, I knew I didn't have a choice but to jump in, because I think when something or someone or a belief system that's greater than you calls you and convicts you to do something in service to others, it's something, at least in my world, that I can't run away from. And so I serve because I have to, because I need to, and I know that my voice matters.
Yeah, that's actually, sorry, Dali. I just I'll get back to you in a minute. I just noticed, you know, you said you have worked with the state Department of Corrections, and you've also worked with a, you know, charter school, and you've been in the world of public education. So how did how does that sort of come together to sort of shape your approach to being on the school board, since that's a really, you know, sort of wide range of experience?
Yeah, I think that plays out, you know, not just in those professional settings, but again, you know, where you come from, who you come from, your day-to-day experiences. These are a collection or a basket of attributes, right? And so, you know, I think all these different experiences have, I think, prepared me for where I am at the moment. And I will say there are quite a few. There are certainly more opportunities to learn going forward, and I look forward to those and I cherish those. But you know, I think your diverse experiences are unique, and those diverse experiences weather you and prepare you for the next round of experiences and challenges. You learn how to have difficult conversations. You learn to be agreeable or maybe not as agreeable when you really believe in something. And so I think all of those experiences, as diverse and different as they are, all sort of, you know, prepare you and sharpen you for the work that you are doing today. You would not be in, you know, as a high school student, you wouldn't be as prepared for this moment or the moments ahead of you if it weren't for the moments behind you that you worked through and that you pushed through. I mean, this pandemic that we're living through right now is very challenging, but I do believe, and I'm very hopeful, that once we're on the other side of this, think about just the mettle and the strength and the resilience and those different attributes and values and skills that will be developed and embedded in us as we move forward, and to be more prepared for and equipped to handle a circumstantial situation that we just don't see coming. We're more prepared. And so I think life does that for us and to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. What improvements do you hope to make in IPS?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, you know, schools exist for one reason, in my opinion, which is to educate and to improve the academic outcomes. They do amazing pieces and things like, you know, they do certainly craft a citizen. We build citizens, we create citizens in our schools. We're diverse conversations happen in schools. There's this amazing ecosystem that happens in a school. And, you know, but I always go back to this issue of improving outcomes. And, you know, when those outcomes are improved, more young people have an opportunity to realize or obtain their wildest and greatest dreams in life. There's more access, more opportunity, because this world's a difficult place at times. And so, you know, my focus when I wake up, my focus when I close my eyes every night is what can we be doing to make IPS a better experience for young people, for our community? And that starts in the classroom, right? And so again, it's focusing on moving the needle on academic achievement all day long. And so that is critical, I think. I think an additional improvement that is incredibly important, I'm very proud of IPS for a recent passage of a board policy 1619. And this was a racial equity mindset commitment and action policy. And that also was accompanied with a Black Lives Matter resolution. And I'm incredibly encouraged and just thankful and grateful and believe that the work that we have been doing for some time and the work that we'll continue to do is focus in on our communities of color and make sure that we're very thoughtful and intentional around, when decisions come to the board or the administration are making decisions or when school leaders are making decisions and principals and teachers and students, that we all are working from a set of facts, that we're working from an understanding that, it's important to honor diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what does that look like at every level or every sort of level of our organization that is IPS? And so, for me, that is critically important that we drive that policy work, into the future, because we are crafting, the minds of young people in the school system. That's part of the responsibility. And so it's critically important that our young people are prepared for a world that is diverse, that is equitable, that is inclusive.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to jump to some questions here posed by some other students, because there's some really, really great questions. First one I see up here is from Alan. He's asking, what is one way to make public school funding more equitable as it pertains to schools in areas with high property taxes?
Mm-hmm. Good question. Man, that's a really good question. And so a lot of the resources, as I mentioned, and one of the responsibilities of the board members, that fiduciary responsibility, so making sure that the resources are appropriated and going where they need to go. But when we think about true equitable funding, a lot of that happens at the state level and the federal level too, but primarily the state level. And so the way, the structure, the way that the funds go to schools, I would say, are predominantly more about equality than equity. And what I mean by that is that a small percentage of the dollars that go from the state to IPS are really, what's a good way to put it, are driven and focused on the world of equity. And that's a concern. And actually, we've seen a little bit of a drawback recently in that world. And so I think it starts there as well. But I think another place it starts is within IPS, and we have that responsibility as a board. And so I'm very proud of the recent work that has been done. We've been very intentional about the amount of funds and resources that come to IPS. We get to appropriate those, and are we appropriating those in an equitable way? And I'm very encouraged and proud of the work that IPS has been undertaking for the last few years to really focus on driving dollars into classrooms, and particularly focusing on the needs of our most at risk and most vulnerable populations. And so that's critically important. The property tax piece is something that is very complex. It's problematic. And I think that I would love to see policymakers at the state level really be thoughtful about how to look at the entire allotment of federal, state, and local dollars, the property tax dollars, to figure out what is the proper formula to make sure that kids who truly need resources, we know there are children that need way more than what the baseline amount is that they receive. And so I'd love to see a conversation around all those different sources and how we can reimagine, redeploy those dollars to really drive them into the communities that need them the most.
Yeah, 100%. Another question from another student, Nevaeh, asked, with your role in the IPS district, how can one ensure that a child graduates with the fundamentals needed to survive the real world, even if they choose not to go to college?
Yeah, can you do me a favor? Can you ask that question one more time? I'm sorry, I lost just the very front of that, or beginning of that question.
Yeah, don't worry. With your role in the IPS district, how can one ensure that a child graduates with the fundamentals needed to survive the real world, even if they choose not to go to college?
Yeah. Well, I'll go back to my statement earlier. I mean, this year of 2020 has been a challenge. And I think that just to pick on this one more time is difficult and as unprecedented. I think that's a very overused phrase or word, but it's true. This experience that we are all living through, regardless of what school we attend or what city or state or nation we live in, we are all working through this. And so I think that I am hopeful that the life skills of resiliency and compassion and grace, I think you start there, because I think that those are values that we all, I hope, are learning more about, not only about ourselves, but we're watching others and we're watching our leaders and how they operate and how they behave in this environment. And so I'm incredibly hopeful that, in spite of the challenging environment that we're in, that we are going to, as a people, be better, and specifically high school students and middle school students and elementary school students, that we will gain or enhance those skills. I think also there's no hiding from the fact that the last few months have, I don't want to say exposed, because they've always been in place, but they have certainly shed a different light and a newer light, or maybe even a brighter light, on the social injustice in our country. And that has created dialogues and conversations. Particularly, I've been so inspired by young people, by students, by the young people that have expressed their voice in conversations, whether they be calls like this, or whether they be larger forums, or whether they be out marching in the streets, using their voice at the ballot box. I'm incredibly encouraged by what I'm seeing in response to injustice. And so, what does that look like going forward? I think you, as the young people here, will make that decision, because this is much of this is yours, what you want this world to be. However, I think there are opportunities for, again, skill building relative to having conversations, grace, understanding, and sometimes just flat out saying enough is enough, right? And so I'm getting around to answer your question, but I guess what I'm getting at is what we're living through right now are definitely, these are sharpening moments for us as a people. And regardless of whatever your next step is, whether it's service to the country in many different ways, whether it's in the workforce, whether it's moving on and considering a 2-year or 4-year academic program at the higher education level, all these skills that are being developed and sharpened in this moment right now, you're going to need them, because inevitably there will be conflict, there will be opportunities to grow, they're going to happen. And so I'm just incredibly encouraged that, and I'm hopeful that this moment and moments that we've been living through over the last few months and beyond that, I mean, this didn't start, particularly the injustice conversations certainly didn't start in June, but I think that I'm very hopeful and encouraged that this will translate to, regardless or whatever that next step is or opportunity is for students at Shortridge, after Shortridge.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It is really important to sort of look, when you're looking at, graduation and the future, to really look at those aspects. I guess since we started a little late, we might go ahead and do a few more questions. One of the ones that I personally have been really passionate about, and I see someone has commented, is to ask, what is the board doing to make IPS more environmentally sustainable, which I think is really important, especially for us young people today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. And so a couple things. I'll hit on one I think that's really important is, I want to say this is maybe 2-3 years ago, IPS, particularly the facilities management division, the folks that manage facilities and operations and those things for the school system, they brought in an organization to really kind of help them think about how we might reduce our dependency on electricity and on different utilities. And so what I mean by that is infrastructure was installed in classrooms. So, in a normal world, you walk in a room, you flip a switch, and hopefully you turn it off when you walk out, kind of like your home that you live in. Computers are plugged in often, appliances are plugged in. And one of the things I'm really excited about, and we've really seen some gains from this, is installing sensors and installing infrastructure that will literally turn the lights off for you. So if you forget to turn them off, they shut them off, and it actually will throttle down and regulate the light in the building. Same thing with the building mechanical systems, the heating and cooling and those things. And so there's definitely been an intention around reducing, I would say, sort of our utility footprint, and we started to see some gains there. That's certainly one piece I think that's really important. I think school buses is another example. Recently, we shifted to a more energy efficient or environmentally friendly school bus product versus what we had always been using and what school districts had been using for generations. And we know that those are more environmentally friendly than what we had before, which were those, old-fashioned diesel school buses that, when you talk about, the wheels on the bus go round and round, that bouncing that's happening and all those fun things, you can just see that smoke coming out of the exhaust pipe. And so those are two examples, Eliana, really of how the district has been intentional and continues to be intentional. And so I would expect to see some new things in the near future as well. But it does also speak to a greater issue of, the facilities in IPS some of those are older than others. And the team is really thinking through how do we enhance the facilities that students like yourself and others attend around IPS. And part of that is how to figure out how to make those more environmentally friendly, efficient, so they're not relying on so much utility expense, et cetera. So good progress has been made, but certainly much more to do.
Yeah, 100%. If you could give one tip for a new voter, what would it be?
One tip for a voter? I just want to make sure I heard that question.
Yeah, one tip for a new voter.
A new voter, yeah. Well, first vote, right? So I love the word voter because that assumes that one is exercising that very important effort. Do your homework. I think that's really important. There are a lot of conversations, and do your homework, learn as much as you can about individuals, about their interests, about their values, those kind of things. I think that's really important to do that. And again, going back to my comments earlier around, around values and around the what gets you up at night, what pushes you through during difficult and challenging times. Take a moment to think about what's important to you and what are the things that matter. Because I think those values and those experiences that you've compiled and compounded over your life, those need to show up as well. What's important, what decisions matter, and then do your homework. And I guess the last piece of that is I love the word voter, but I love the word voters more. And so, challenge your colleagues, your friends, your community to come with you. And hopefully they're registered to vote. And I think it's really important that it isn't just a singular my vote. That is very important. That is incredibly important, but also rallying others to be a part of the process, because this is such an important part of our democracy that voting is one of the most important rights that we get to have.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the importance of voting, and I really appreciate, coming from a perspective of a board commissioner. I think it sort of helps for us students to hear, and especially, to reinforce the importance of voting down ballot too. I mean, school board is very important, and it's absolutely vital. Well, it looks like we're winding down around to our end of our time. Is that right, Mr. Pachter, or do we have a little bit more?
No more.
One more question?
Fine. One more question.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So let's see. There's a couple new questions that have been coming in here. Here's a good one. Since there's two actually good ones. Ooh, this is tough. But this might be good, I guess, for just to inform some students. Someone asked, what's the difference between public, charter, and innovation schools, and what is IPS doing to help schools in the pandemic? I think the pandemic part is probably most important right now and most relevant to us as we're all, transitioning to either hybrid school or staying online.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that, this conversation has been a conversation since, March 12th of 2020, which feels like so many years ago, even though it wasn't. This has been at the target or the central sort of circle of the bullseye. This has been the primary conversation, not just for IPS, but for schools across the country and the world. And I'm very proud of the difficult decisions that were made. But I think what I would say is that know that your teachers, your school leaders, your administrators, administration, as well as the board, will always stay true to understanding the data, as well as listening to and ensuring that the voices of public health experts and professionals are front and center in the conversations. And that's where this began, was really sitting back and gathering that guidance and leadership from the Marion County Public Health Department, as well as the State Health Department. So we start there. And that's really rooted in the value of safety, right? I mean, your safety, the safety of teachers, the safety of administrators,